Welcome everyone to episode 10 of How to Do Psychedelics. I have a very special guest today, Len Van Nostrand, MA, CCP. For over 30 years, Len has been a pioneer in promoting a progressive, compassionate, and now a 21st century approach to the issues surrounding substance use, traumatic stress, and personal growth. An expert in the field of harm reduction and addictive behaviors, Len has been recognized for being a strategic and resourceful family crisis interventionist. He is the founder of Full Spectrum Recovery and Counseling, an outpatient treatment center supporting harm reduction, recovery alternatives, psychotherapy, couples counseling, and psychedelic coaching. Len has launched numerous support groups, including the Smart Recovery Group, the FACE, Family Addiction Counseling and Education for Parents, the Santa Barbara Psychedelic Integration Group, codependency groups and groups for adult children of alcoholics. He's a certified smart recovery and craft facilitator. His extensive work with men in transition and helping couples with his partner is a primary passion. Len's interest in alternative and pragmatic support for those seeking healing and a life beyond recovery has helped thousands of people. Highly trained in the process of intentional change, Len has been a sought-after teacher and trainer. Trained as a clinical psychotherapist, Len has continued his 8th year in underground psychedelic medicine guide training in the lineage of Maria Sabina. He has been facilitating regular ceremonies with his partner and medicine guide, Lisa Satori. Len is well known as a rich resource of knowledge in the realm of psychedelic medicines. His personal mystical experiences have defined his mission to introduce others to the untapped benefits of non-ordinary states and create opportunities for others to find personal and spiritual fulfillment. Enjoying a lifelong relationship with plants, especially cactus, Len has immersed himself in the discovery of rich potential of these sacraments to accelerate the process of personal transformation. I'd like to add a bit to that. Len has been an instrumental teacher, guide, and mentor to me. When I was first experiencing healing with psychedelics in my life and realizing this is what I wanted to do, I made a prayer. I made a prayer for guidance and support, and this man showed up. Without his guidance, his wisdom, not simply with psychedelics and psychotherapy and understanding the deep, unique pains of the Western mind, he also introduced me to men's work. And for those that understand my ethic, I work at the intersection of men's work, psycho-spiritual coaching, and psychedelic guideship. And so who you're seeing before me has been absolutely instrumental in who I am, what I value, and most of all, turning my attention toward the gifts that I have to give. He helped me understand what it is to trust a man, to understand the gifts that a father figure can offer to an apprentice, to someone who is still yet to become a man. I could go on, but I'll stop there and hand it over to Len to see if he wants to add anything else.
Wow. Thank you, Kyle. I saw something in you when we met, Kyle. So it wasn't a stretch for me to lock arms with you and to support you on your life path. And my relationship with you has unlocked something in me, which is that father energy. Not just the father energy, but the grandfather energy, the energy of patience and compassion, and also a keen respect for men coming up, young men coming up. You're actually in midlife right now, and just to coin a phrase, and as far as the bio, every day, up until recently, 5 days a week, session after session, 25 clients a week, has really honed my understanding of the human experience. and it's really helped me to understand the trajectory of healing and the nuances of severity in PTSD and trauma. It's also helped me in the medicine work in terms of understanding how to support somebody who's approaching psychedelic medicine. Also, my work, my early career as a contractor and as a mechanic taught me how to triage, taught me how to move in on problems, how to be a problem solver, but mostly how to be in service and to really pay attention to what people's needs are, and to develop the tools and cultivate the tools to meet those needs. And so that has led to me being an astute doser of psychedelic medicines. I have understood and studied the potency of these sacraments and the application of these sacraments for each individual case.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, as far as my bio, I'll just say that all the groups that I've started and the works that I've done, including my internship at the rescue mission and my working with homeless and my working with severely addicted population, as well as developing a copyrighted moderate drinking program, has fit into my deep belief in harm reduction and benefit optimization. I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I often tell people about you, which I understand has deeply informed the way that I navigate this work, also with a keen eye for harm reduction and, yes, benefit optimization. Love that new term, thanks to our brother Merrill. You were way ahead of the curve when it came to integration. It's still a nascent conversation, and you were offering that before it was even in such dire need as now, and offering others alternatives to being with their addictions, normalizing it, saying, hey, this is the best solution you've got right now. Let's not shame you. Let's not demonize you.
Yeah.
Let's not bring in dogma. Let's meet you where you're at. And that is the core tenet of doing this work, is meeting people where they're at.
That's
And
right.
I just wanted to presence that.
Yeah, thank you. My early entrance into that had to do not only with my own personal experience, but through the people I was working with. I was I used cannabis, I drank, I used different substances, and I felt, as some people, I felt kind of a judgment for myself, or like I wondered if I was having a problem, and in my work in the field of addiction, there was a preponderance of emphasis on a 20th century model, which was the religious model. And I kept having folks come to me who could not relate to the standard for so-called recovery, that they had to take a label, and they had to, if they were addicted to something, they were addicted to everything. And if they had a problem with anything, they were an addict. And that the only way for them to deal with their addiction was to join a group and spill their guts, and then to be under a specter of shame if they ever did anything against the rules. And so me and some other therapists who kept seeing this problem, where people would come to us and say, you can't help me because I don't want to go to AA, or I don't want to do this thing, and I'm not religious, and I don't want to be a part of a group. And so we started Full Spectrum Recovery, which met people where they're at. I was highly trained by William Miller, who wrote the seminal work called Motivational Interviewing. I did extensive multi-year training with him. I became a trainer of trainers in motivational interviewing. I began teaching in universities and local workshops, and we built our practice on that. And out of that came my affection for and my affiliation with Smart Recovery. Smart recovery is a non-religious, 21st century based approach that deals with cultivating and sustaining motivation to change, managing urges and cravings, dealing with difficult emotions, and having a balanced life.
Mm-hmm.
So that group that I started in 2014 is still going in Santa Barbara right now.
Yeah. The thing I find funniest about AA is it was highly influenced by the founder's experience with LSD, right?
That's right.
Like, what's up with the connection there? I'm like, come on, have a little more compassion for these
Well,
people you get from.
well, Bill, yeah, he was shut down. It was too out there because it was considered a drug. And yeah, that's where the road diverged, and that opportunity was missed.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of how
I will
much
say
it,
something that you're reminding me of, that the locked in model of AA could very well be kind of what the world of psychedelics is doing right now. That there's a right way to do it. That there's
mm-hmm.
certain terms that we understand. Let go and let God. Uh, if you take one drink, you've relapsed. You're at risk of insanity, prison, or death. In the same
Mm-hmm.
vein, if you don't have a good intention, you better be careful about doing psychedelics. If you don't integrate, you haven't used psychedelics properly. If you do them alone and you experiment by yourself and you don't have a guide or a sitter, you're at risk. These are all spurious claims. They may not be true. Some people who come to do the psychedelic work with me and other guides that I know, when they're asked what their intention is, they try to come up with one. I just want to be open. I want to see myself.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea that I want to be healed, I want to be a better person, I want to be changed. Most people are lucky if they have insight, which is kind of the booby prize. But the real transformation is going to take place with the higher dose work, where people don't really have so much insight. This is straight out of Groff's research in LSD therapy. People don't always get insight, but they walk around differently in the world. They might have just quieted their mind, or they may have
Mm-hmm.
done something with their nervous system that makes them seeing through a different lens in the world. But
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics per se, they don't do anything. They're not like a Zoloft or a ibuprofen. They
That's
don't
right.
fix anything.
I'm glad that you brought up the current cultural mythic body that we're moving through in this stage. And I want to put a pin in that. But before we dive into that, which you're going to have a lot of fun with, I want to know more about your story that brought you here. Now, one of the core tenets of this show is that we get to learn a bit about the person before us by understanding their most meaningful or significant experience with psychedelics, with the mystical. And I want to turn it over to you now to tell that story.
Well, I had an interesting past. I was a whiskey kid, kind of a latchkey kid in the '60s. Um, discovered
Maybe latchkey. Can you just define that? I don't know that term.
a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are kids that their folks leave a key under the mat, or that
All right.
they come home from school and nobody's home.
Got it. Okay.
So they're just kids that are kind of on their own. Um, I went to Woodstock. I had just turned 16 in June of '69, and a few months later, I went to Woodstock. And I had been introduced to various substances by that time, mostly cannabis. In those days, we had Orange Sunshine and Orange Barrel, and I was exposed to that. Really, it wasn't your question about the most significant psychedelic experience. Almost every one is the most significant for me.
Well,
And
what turned you on? What turned you toward this? If you had to look back and like find that turning point.
the turning point was after doing psychedelics, I ended up in juvenile hall. And in juvenile hall, I read a book called Psychocybernetics. So in some ways, psychedelics opened me up to exploring my mind and coming to the understanding that I could, in fact, own my mind, and I could install thoughts in my mind. I could stop thoughts, and that I could use my mind to guide my life. And so it launched me into a deep curiosity about mysticism and about the inner world. And so at about 17 or 18, I hitchhiked to California from New Jersey. And during that time, the Jesus movement was in full sway. And I was traveling around, getting high and being a hippie on the road. And I met some people who asked me what I needed on a beach in Big Sur. Had a backpack, was traveling with a girlfriend. And I was.
Now I know why you love Big Sur so much.
I love Big Sur. And I was depressed. My brother had died. One of my best friends had died. And I was having a rough time. And they asked me, what do you need? And I said, I need peace. And I want to learn how to love. I want to know how to love. And they said, well, why don't you pray to God? Why don't you ask Jesus for help? And I had already had classmates, and all across the country, people were saying, come to Christ, say the prayer. And I just said, I'm good. I'm pretty good. I kind of get what you're after here. Thank you anyway. But at this time, I said, okay, what do I have to lose? What do I do? And they said, just ask for help. I said, God, if you're real, I need help. Help me. And I felt something in my body that I remember to this day, a kind of charge, call it Kundalini or something. And I let go of any kind of artifacts I had or any attachments I had to anything else. And I was sort of shuttled into a space of peace and safety and love. And that night I did do a hit of acid on the beach in Big Sur. But I did it with a knowing that I was held by the universe or held by God.
So in a way, there was an embodied intention.
That's right. That's right. And that's maybe where the intention should come from, right? Is just that deep core, simple sense of need or openness.
Yeah, there's something to that. Like it speaks to the timing and like the why behind it.
So,
And,
you ask about my most significant psychedelic experience. From there, now I'm heading into my 20s now. I entered into a 10-year period of being completely straight, sober, and celibate. No sex, drugs, or rock and roll. I completely eschew. I miss the 70s. I miss the Dead. I miss the Brady Bunch. I miss the Eagle. I missed it all because I spent hours every day on a commune praying, meditating, singing, and eschewing news and media, learning about organic food, learning about diet, learning about meditation.
you accepted that invitation from these men, these Christians, and joined their community.
Yeah, I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it changed my life. That's where I learned how to be a public speaker. That's where I learned that I am, in fact, able to transmit a gift in terms of being a helper. That's where the early days of what I was really attracted to was the task of bridging the psychological and the spiritual. I wanted to afford as many opportunities for people to experience the mystical state without having to be religious, without having to do a lot of work. And I wanted to learn, and that's where I began to learn ways to communicate spiritual truths in a grounded kind of way.
Yeah, that definitely tracks. I
And
find it fascinating.
I've dedicated my life to being a bridge, to offering people opportunities to experience the numinous. And so, if they want to be healed, maybe that will happen. If they want to purge something, maybe that will happen. If they want to face fear, enter into the unknown, I'm open to supporting that.
Yeah. And that's why it's called guide work. We walk with people by their side across the bridges that we have known in our own way. And I'm just noticing now how fascinating it is that coming to Christ was an integral part of this orientation for you. And then you offer an alternative to a recovery service that's based in Christianity, but you're like, that way of using it is not so helpful, being dogmatic and shameful and using it as a sort of whip to drive them along. Yeah, there's an interesting there.
The model of Jesus is the foundation of my embracing harm reduction.
Yes.
Because when I see the compassion that was shown toward the thief and the failure and the slut and the tax collector and the so-called sinner, my practice was filled with those people. I had shame walking into my office every hour, every day, of people who I need to quit, but not now. I should do something, but I'm still going to use. I care, but not that much. I care, but not enough to stop. I should, but I'm not. And so I watch people struggle with ambivalence on a regular basis. And the only response to that is compassion, because it's a miserable space for people to be in, and they don't get out of it until they're able to work that complex dilemma of I care.
And you could have that compassion with them and meet them because in many ways you understood what it was like to be these dejected folk that Christ came to help.
That's right.
To save.
And I never felt like I could go to AA. I never really identified as an addict, and I never identified as having a disease. And I could for sure was not going to hang out with people who were going to judge me for smoking a joint or exploring consciousness. I have a deep affinity for that path.
I mean, you've had that embodiment, that ethic around this is okay, I'm okay, and I'm curious about this. You've had that the whole time, which is like one of your deepest gifts, I feel.
I think some folks who go to AA are getting gypped. They're being tricked, or they're being given a message that somehow they don't get to explore being high. They don't get to explore, which is sort of a slur in the AA community, but they don't get to explore the psychedelic realm, the mystical realm. And thank God for the folks in San Francisco. Is it Psychedelics in Recovery? They're forging a path for people who identify as addicts or alcoholics who are using psychedelics for transformation.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic and necessary movement and body of work right now. Well, now that we got that story, let's dive into what you prefaced earlier, the myths currently moving about and informing us and shaping us in the psychedelic space. As you mentioned, this burden of the language that we're using, intention, integration, and doing the work. Yeah, you want to unpack that a little more and see where it takes us?
What is an intention? Is it like a prayer that you heave toward the heavens, or you breathe into your capsule, and then within 2 hours, can you even remember it? Like, what is that? What is the interplay between what the medicine does, which is often a non-specific amplifier, and you wanting to get something? Trungpa Rinpoche wrote a book called Spiritual Materialism, where he calls out those people who meditate and those people who do yoga and all these practices in order to get something. They want to get something out of meditating. it's spurious. It's not really, if you just scratch the surface of that, you may discover that it's very egoic.
Yeah, I mean, the Western mind is looking for solutions, looking for the magic bullet and the golden pill, and that's very largely still there. Something I have to temper people around often. But yeah, what is an intention? For me, it's really getting down to the why. Just helping them get clear why they're here. It doesn't need to be some like devout prayer that they understand fully and completely, but simply this is what I feel is the most important part of preparing someone. It's like, okay, helping them understand where they are in their life. Where are they on this current arc of their hero's journey, so to speak? What is a myth that they're playing out personally and culturally? Do they understand what constitutes them? And with that understanding, okay, well, what about that is bringing you here? Where are you? And what do you want to do with that? Because I agree. What happens in the space is largely non-specific and symbolic and archetypal, and we're meant to just simply experience it. But I find if they're helped to become clear on their why,
Yeah.
their composting afterwards, their meaning making is couched in the context of what was discovered and understood beforehand. There is a thread. And so I see a lot of people get really wrapped up in, well, my intention was to like feel love or like to meet my grandparents, and it didn't happen. I'm like, well, why did you want to meet your grandparents? Why did you want to feel love?
Yeah.
And then there's always a thread that can be woven with the right skill and expertise.
Well, yes, and again, you have received training as a so-called integrationist, um, but I want to reference a book by Wasson and Hoffman. Gordon Wasson, who brought mushrooms from Mexico to the U.S. and blew it open through an article in Life magazine, and Albert Hoffman, the father of LSD.
Mm-hmm.
In this book, The Road to Eleusis, they describe who were the aspirants that attended the temples of Eleusis. And one of the biggest points that was made there that really stuck with me is that they were not going to learn anything. They were not going to the temple to learn. They weren't bringing a yellow legal pad. They were not bringing a recorder. They were not taking notes.
I see where this is going.
And they didn't know shit. They just knew some. So to your point, like dig into the why. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? That's important. But those people, maybe they didn't get that far where somebody said you need to understand why you're here. They just knew I'm supposed to be here. I'm called to this. I'm called to this, and I don't have any idea what I'm doing or why I'm here. But I'm called to the mat, and I'm called to working with this guide to be guided into a realm that I don't really know what it is. And I like the maps bringing to the psychedelic space the idea of the non-directional approach. I like it, and I really like your approach, which is not so non-directional, where you're actually working as an active guide before, during, and after the medicine experience.
I think it's both and. So like I imagine that those going to the Temple of Eleusis, there was, of course, many differences between them and like the common Westerner coming into this work. Like they were in a village, they were in a tribe, they had shared ethics, values, and ideals. They felt very safe with each other, and they probably had a strong connection to gods or God or faith. And I find that is largely absent with so many people that are coming into this work. And yeah, simply availing oneself to curiosity is fantastic. And so much more can come up with people who have such a disconnection from nature, from God, from tribe, from consciousness, from themselves. Because connection is the true medicine here for most people. Connection, lack of connection is what drives us towards addiction. It's simply striving for an answer outside to reconnect with self, God, nature, love. And so, yeah, I certainly agree. And I bring a lot of curiosity into what is the gap between how it was done before and how it's being done now. What were the constituent elements that allowed these aspirants to the Temple of Eleusis to all walk in just okay with not knowing what was going to happen, but to be fully guided. Just to allow someone to guide you,
Yeah,
that takes a lot of trust and
that's
support
right.
in many, many things.
Including guiding people to accept not knowing, including that's a huge component of guidance where we make sure people, where we probe their relationship with disappointment, where we understand people's relationship with us making assumptions or having expectations of the medicine. You got to go in pretty strict as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And people have a lot of fucking expectations around this work. We need to normalize the fact that you might get nothing out of this. It might not be at all what you expect.
That's right.
It might suck. You might feel worse afterwards, and that's okay.
And I'd like to segue a little bit into the expectations we have of the guides,
Yeah.
not just of the setting. I want to add support, substance, and safety.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh, support.
those S's. What happens? This is right up your alley. What happens when you've got a guide that makes a mistake? So recently, I was invited to be a part of an ethics committee, and I was on a thread where somebody was accused of some unethical behavior, and it wasn't sexual behavior. It was just a more not jest, but it was offensive toward a client. It was actually anti-Semitic, and
Mm.
this person was being called out online. And my question was, and I've seen you call out treatment centers online. My question to this person who posted this is, are you posting this for us to shun this man and cancel him? Or are you posting this so that we can embrace him?
Mm-hmm.
And it started a firestorm because it got us into the binary. You either are good or you suck. And so, what one of the things that I'm really curious about in this culture is, do we have compassion for those that make mistakes? I've argued with you pretty regularly about this idea that we should off with their heads and all these treatment centers should be cut down, when in fact, many of them are doing good work and some of them make mistakes.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
how do we deal with those that make mistakes? I'm going to plug in my charger. Are we going to get good at canceling? Are we going to raise the bar when it comes to training? Are we going to vet? And unless you're a part of the BBS or the APA, there is no mechanism for censoring you, or
Mm-hmm.
there's no way to hold people accountable. And so one way that it looks like you've espoused is, just disqualify them and move on. Let's work on having something better. So I'm curious about how you see that.
Well, to me, first of all, just to state where we're at right now, the body of ethic is being formed. There is no agreement. One thing I learned from my time as an operations and systems professional in tech, anything that's being birthed or created, and in this case it was a product, has to go through three major phases: storming, norming, and performing. Norming is where you develop the ethics and the values and ideals that everyone moves along with. Performing is when that's all dialed in and you can refine. We're storming right now. It's a shit show. It's chaos. It's not a renaissance at all. And so we're figuring that out. And
Well,
so
we're kind of figuring it out, but we have the
kind of,
conclave and we have the BBS and we have the APA. They have given us a rudimentary structure for ethics and accountability. So we're not completely reinventing the wheel.
not entirely. And so there's that. And that's coming from a certain cohort of people that have done some work from a certain background and angle. And I largely feel like it might be lacking a full understanding of the more, how can I say, animistic approach, understanding
Sure.
in the styles that it worked. Like,
Yes.
let's look at the village. To me, it all comes down to the village
Yeah.
model.
Well,
And we're not in villages yet.
it's as close as we've got. I mean,
Yeah, we're going to
these
start somewhere.
these ethics have been developed by people who are working in the trenches with the exact demographic that the psychedelic space is working. Trauma, self-knowledge, depth, exploration of consciousness. You know,
Yeah.
that's what people come to therapy for.
And what I see is a lot of people who are coming up with these rubrics are largely coming from the therapeutic background, the psychological background. And I get that. That's important right now because that's what we got to look at. But my belief largely is that a lot of the great body of understanding with psychotherapy, with an exception with Jung, for example, and I think that's why he's become so popular in this space because he talks about archetypes and he bridges to the
Right?
mystical. But
Yes.
most therapeutic practice is simply symptomatic. We're trying to bring people to psychic baseline. And then from there, what? From there, we need to connect to the divine, to the mystical, and to God. And so a lot of people who are coming up with these ethics and rubrics are operating from the space of like psychic, psychological wellness, but there's a whole other side to it. And I feel like we need to start looking at that as well. And so the first question was, how can you be a guide? What's expected? And I also want to preface, I've named this before, there are many roles we can take in this work. Guide is the highest one. Sitter is, okay, someone wants to go on a journey. You feel good enough with yourself that you can be with bigger emotions and just sit for them, but you're not interacting at all. You might help them organize the space and kind of put together a playlist. And that's going more into facilitation, like you have some hand in the setting, in the space. But guide work, one thing I come back to around this, if you're going to work with any sort of medicine to help guide somebody, especially if it's an ancient plant that has a different level of history and complexity, like, MDMA is a medicine made for Westerners by Westerners. 5-MeO has very little history. But if you're going to work with one of these ancient plants that has a deep history, apprenticeship is the only way. You need to find a master and to learn from them. And that is something I'm incredibly grateful for you, because you studied with masters and you imparted that knowledge to me. Experience, time on the mat, time in the Maloka, time in the jungle. There is nothing theoretical or didactic that is going to certify you to do any of this.
Yeah,
Maybe be a sitter, maybe to sit, maybe.
yeah.
But if you haven't gone there, you have no idea what you might need to actually hold space for, and that's really risky. And so to get to the heart of the thing you poked at, yeah, retreat centers. So I was walking around for many years being right. I experienced a lot of pain when I went to the Amazon and sat with 200 people about 14 times in 2 weeks. No understanding of kind of transference, impeccably held there because the power of the set and setting was just is off the dial. Like you're in the home of the Amazon with ancient wisdom keepers, and you're in the purity of the jungle, which all supports the process. But you're also working with people who don't understand at all the need of supporting the Western psychological mindset. Our unique pathology is foreign to them. And we didn't know anyone there. There was no intake. There was no asking us about our understanding of our trauma and our
Very
background or
risky.
what we're
Very
doing,
risky.
and no support afterwards. This
Yeah.
heralded 3 years of anxiety, depression, suicidality. And I would say the only reason I was able to emerge from that with a gift is because I had you orienting me and guiding me along the way. And I've met many people from that space ever since, and like, yeah, they've had their trouble getting back on their feet, by the grace of God, in so many ways. But it doesn't need to be that hard. And if we're going to start opening the doors to as many people that are knocking them down, we need to understand how to hold them. This is the big I integration, the syncretism of ancient wisdom and the modern, unique pathological mindset and the tools there that can help them. And this is where Jung really comes in, like compassionate inquiry, compassionate somatic experiencing, IFS. Like these are such amazing tools for this because they lead us into a curiosity of what's happening inside. We're not diagnosing. Oh, someone thinks you're depressed or anxious. Yeah, what does that mean to you? Where do you feel that? What's its story? That is everything in this space. And so, yeah, I was walking around wagging a finger thinking I knew what was right. Anything that just smelled faintly of the way I was abused in the Amazon was a problem. And now I'm more curious. I'm not pushing away the people I can help, and I'm trying to lean in, and it's helped me largely heal that wound. But I still stand firm that most retreat centers are reaching too far. We're not normalized enough to be able to hold space for a bunch of strangers without giving them the true care of community. If there isn't an enduring offering to continue to speak with them and help them and find ways to find support in their communities that are sometimes thousands of miles away, you've got no right doing this work. You're missing the point. And it's largely driven by capitalism and business. And at that level, no. But like if you're sitting with your own neighbors and friends and community regularly, and most of the people coming are the same people, and a few new ones come here and there, that is where we're at.
Yeah, it's a I call it the cottage model, where
Yeah.
you're with your neighbors, you're with your friends. It's in this world, fast-paced world of commodification and everything online, and people are selling retreats. There are often situations where newcomers are in a circle of other newcomers. When we have ceremonies, we often have people who are regulars, but we do uh, actually we focus on welcome. We focus on welcoming and incorporating into the family people who show up that are new. And I want to just comment too about your history. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You came out of there with a very dull sword, a
I
dirty,
wanted to die.
with a dull sword. That's all you had, man. And you were hurt. And what I appreciate is that you have not dropped your sword. Your sword has been shined and sharpened, and that you are much more. Your sword is much more of a scalpel now. That you're able to cut as needed. You're using that experience like a true warrior. The shadow of the warrior is anger. He kills. It's all about his own experience. But the true warrior is in service to a higher calling, right? The true warrior is in service to the king. And so your warrior energy has been refined. And so you're able to take that experience now, you've metabolized it, and you've converted it into something that can be helpful for others. And my grind over those years was, this isn't just about you. This is, and if it's going to be about others, it's going to involve compassion. It's going to involve patience. It's going to involve you bringing all your gifts, not just your anger. So I appreciate the transformation you've gone through since that experience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It was
Yeah,
a
the
gift.
warrior is in service to the king, and the king's in service to God. And I, like you, had a similar experience that changed my tone when Jesus came to me during, of course, a Wachuma ceremony here a few years ago. And the compassion and the grace and the clarity and the forgiveness just started pouring in. And that changes everything. I've seen so many people get wrapped up in the new age buffet of spirituality and practices and just parroting everything that they're hearing, but it lacks substance. They're not actually committed to anything higher than themselves. Manifestation is one thing, but I found that is largely selfish. I need this. I want this. Well, for what? But when you pray, when you're asking God to help you, embolden you to move on your path of service and mission, that is different. That's what's lacking a lot in the quote unquote spiritual spaces. It's a lot of proselytizing ourselves before these false idols and these made up ideals. And it's a path that I've walked and I get it and I have compassion for it. But this goes back to my statement before. These medicines, the connection we experience, the people that surround us in these communities that we're building, they are driving us towards relationship with God, the mystical, the numinous.
And to
That's
your
what we're lacking in the world.
earlier point, to our relationship with the community, one of the reasons why I have been so emboldened and so strengthened and supported, uh, despite having been canceled or shamed or you know felt like I didn't belong, has been my relationship with a very strong, beautiful cohort and cadre of other guides.
Mm-hmm.
Not only a larger, you know, national circle of guides, but just this core group of 15 people that I've been with for years that are meeting regularly, monthly, and then quarterly for retreats where we're constantly, addressing issues around safety, issues around complexity, issues around medications, around dosing, around vetting and assessing, issues around preparing and holding ceremony, including safe sourcing of substances, as well as incorporating prayer in the medicine state. Not just tripping, but incorporating opportunities for people to share and to what we call pray, where they can
Mm-hmm.
intercede or make their contact with the divine. And the Wachuma is especially useful for that, by the way.
Certainly is. I do want to make note that, like, for those who are listening earlier on, understanding that a lot of what I've learned was from Len here, it was in supporting him in the early days when he was just beginning his offerings with Wachuma. And I was on the tail end of years of masochistic healing because I realized I was hurting people. I'm like, well, my healing has to hurt. And that's what ayahuasca gave me. And then when I realized it can be beautiful, I can be surrounded by loving people on a regular basis in a safe place and just like feel this in my body, sing, pray, dance, share poetry, sit under a tree, go to the beach bluffs, share food.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And like, this is precisely why, going back to a point that you made, yeah, intention is really helpful. But what's most important is safety, connection, and community. And so I know that there are people that have been like sitting with you for years that constantly come to me in integration circles like, yeah, you ask about attention, Kyle, but like I never really have one, but I have a great time. And then all the reflections that this person gets from everyone else affirms his place, his gift, and how he has brought love and connection into their lives.
That's right.
It's because that's the medicine right now.
Yeah. And, that same person may have wept and purged and cried and shook. I think of my beloved Lisa. She regularly reminds people that, doing the so-called work is a powerful portal to personal change. Shadow work, suffering, purging, facing the dark. But so is pleasure. So is enjoyment. So is community. So is awe and wonder and eyes open, daytime, exquisite appreciation of the natural world and of one another through poetry and music and dance and silent meditation and breath work. So psychedelics are just one of the many tools that we're using, to our earlier point, to foster, living in a good way in the world with one another. And we don't always have to be, doing the work, the so-called
doing efforting.
It'll come. The work comes.
Yeah. And there's something in there around this like Western programming mindset that we have to work. We have to put in to get something. There has to be some discernible and practical connection between what we receive. Otherwise, we didn't earn it.
Yeah. And is it okay and do you get something when you don't get something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
Yeah.
Nothing.
How about lots of nothing? How about something we rarely tap, which is nothing? Beautiful space and stillness and quiet and not knowing.
That, and I've told you this many times, and it's still the truth. And it's like the thing right now that's grinding me as I move towards my vision quest. That's been the underlying teaching of everything, like under every other potent insight or experience with the mystical, the numinous beings, what have you. Slow down.
Yeah.
Do less.
Yeah.
Just enjoy more. And this is something that's like, it's happening for me right now. Like when I came back from all this work last month with Sundance and then going into leading my first harm reduction team and day-long in-person men's work at a Burning Man event here, I was like, all right, I'm going to get back. I got to absorb and integrate all this and like come up with the next thing, get back to work. People have been waiting for me. And it hasn't been happening. And you know what? My core prayer at the Sundance, when I offered my flesh to this tree of life, it's like, I don't have to do this alone anymore. And so what's changed since I got back is all these people are showing up that want to work with me with perfectly complementary skill sets. And I'm like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to lean into these conversations. I'm going to see what wants to be born. I'm going to do the bare minimum to keep up with my practice, like with my clients. And I'm just like noticing how good this feels.
Yeah,
And
it
how I
sounds like
don't need to strive.
it's a beautiful. It's a good look on you, Kyle. It sounds like maturity. It sounds like you know. It sounds like you've been reading the Tao Te Ching. That doing by non-doing. Less is more. Tolerating the projections of others that say you need to be witty, you need to be knowledgeable, you need to perform, you need to. If you're special, if you're a leader, if you're a guide, you're supposed to do something. This is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
bringing to the men's retreat this weekend. This sort of free floating imperative that the leaders of the weekend have to perform, and we've got to provide an experience for people. you know,
It's we're holding space for the experience. We're nurturing the conditions for that, and that's really it.
yeah, and just that expression, holding space, is a really interesting one. That's another one
Yeah,
of the
do it.
mythological, burdens that we carry into the psychedelic space.
I mean, you get this as a guide, and I do too, and I get the feedback all the time. And sometimes I still don't just like embody that, but we are the space. Our training and our experience and our development allows our presence to simply allow for many things
That's
to
right.
happen.
That's right.
You call it medicine presence. This is something that only comes with deep years of training, experience, cultivation, skill, curiosity, prayer. And like that's the
Feedback,
deepest thing.
feedback, and accountability and
Yeah.
consultation,
Yes.
and lots of mistakes.
Falling on your sword. I tell people all the time. I said to someone today as I was cutting wood, getting ready for peyote ceremony this weekend. One of the best lessons my teacher taught me is lean in. Is like, how don't you learn to lose some more? Just let it go. Just be wrong. That's a good one.
I think it's the message of Christ
Ah,
is to lose. You want to you want to see a model of somebody who lost in a big way, and what came
yeah.
out of that? Look at Jesus.
And get this, Len. The moment I my mind turned its tide against being right about the retreat centers, like I was on a fucking tirade here with two
I
of my
know.
closest friends. And one of them just kind of said to me, "Forgive them, Father, because they do not know." And I just
Yeah,
snap up at him. And I'm
right.
like,
What?
I felt all the confusion in me. I'm like, it that's it. It really is that easy. Like they
Oh.
just don't know. And that's when I realized that's why we're having this podcast, because this is the best way for me to educate and
Yes,
inform others and empower them to make their own decisions.
I love it. Yeah, the forgiveness is big. I heard a podcast by Wayne Dyer this morning while I was driving in. Wayne Dyer was so angry and holding unforgiveness toward his father, who was abusive, and he went to the gravesite and raged at his father. And as I was leaving, a little voice said, go back and forgive him." And he said when he did that, it led to him completely changing his life, writing 40 books, being a teacher, being a healer. And it all came out of that moment when something shifted inside of him, where he decided to embrace forgiveness instead of being right, instead of being sure, and instead of looking at his past as if something wrong had happened. Now, I have a message before we close. Unless you are in right relationship with your past, and by that I mean nothing unfinished, with your parents, with your history, with all your experiences, you're going to have trouble in your present, and your future is going to be difficult. And what I mean by right relationship is a very high vibe perspective that says all of this is for me. My whole
Yeah.
life has been on track, including those days in the Amazon. My life has been completely on track to shape me to be the man I am today. So there's nothing that has happened that is wrong. I'm not a victim. It didn't happen to me or at me. It's for me. And that's a tough one. That's a tough one, but that's a really a source of peace.
I kind of want to speak to that right now because this is really coming up for me. those that understand me and know what I've been doing, like I've been deep into this for almost a decade now. Hundreds of ceremonies and so much work with myself and others, so many mirrors and reflections. The thing that really started my spiritual path is when like I suffered this injury. It was in martial arts and I got back pain and I couldn't deal with it. I was no longer invincible. And I shattered my whole identity of who I was. And so I'm like, I should learn yoga and breathwork and meditation and find a way to fix all the mental, which is a superpower as an Aquarian and everything and a systems person. But like, it's been made abundantly clear to me that what I'm about to do, since I've like stepped into the path of Sundance and going to Quest next month, I realized why I still hold this pain. I've made some amends with my father recently. I always knew his shadows that he gave me, all the fury and the wrath and just like being disingenuous and womanizing. And I'm like, okay, his gift has been his willpower and his strength, but I still haven't forgiven him. I've been thinking about these conversations I have, but there hasn't been forgiveness. And the reason why I carry this pain, it got brought to me in IFS session yesterday, the things that happened, like cheating on my mother and like breaking the family. I had no guide. I had no one to guide me in my life. Everyone's like, "Oh, we love Kyle. Whatever you're doing is great." All the support, but I was lost, and I had to do it myself. And it was never enough because I didn't know what was enough. I got an idea when I met you because you gave me something, but you couldn't fix what my father did. And so I realized I've been pushing myself my whole life. The first spiritual teacher in my life said to me, "You're always on the balls of your feet. You're always moving forward. There's always somewhere to go." And Muay Thai, how I hurt myself because I was on the balls of my feet and just like kicking and moving so hard with no care and no repair. And like that's what I'm with right now. I'm finally coming into like the core wound that put me on this path. And when I was told in this impeccable reading yesterday from another man from New England who's just as rough and tumble as we are in the East Coast, he's like, what you need to do is to stop thinking about how to do this. No more practice, no more teaching, no more doing. You're on the threshold of becoming as vulnerable as you can with the people you love the most about this pain. And that's the only way through.
Wow. So what do you? So what is in the way of forgiving your father? What does it serve you to not forgive him? That's even a more important question. What do you get by holding something against him, whether he's dead or alive? Like how does that affect your nervous system and the way you relate to men and the way you relate to your past? I have not forgiven my father. So what? So what is that?
It's still a kind of mystery to me. I just know it's the thing that's this unknown is what's pushing me, always having me rush and like just stop on a dime and turn around to do something else. That's not what I'm doing in front of me. Now I have to do this. It's filling my time, and this is why the medicine coming to me in Vision Quest is silence and stillness and meditation because that's I haven't mastered that yet, and it's I don't know. I just know it's the next thing. It's
When I was in the middle of it, I had a grind toward my father. I had a lot of reasons to have a grind toward my father. I was a whiskey kid. He was a womanizer. He was violent. He came to me in an ayahuasca session one time, just stood in front of me, pathetic, shoulders hunched, head down. I could see he was just completely vulnerable with shame and with, the baggage of his life. 7 kids, was a wreck. And he just stood there with no excuse and just kind of let me have at him. Like, I got nothing. He was open to me killing him, attacking him, hating him. And he just said, I'm part of you. I'm in your life. And frankly, it may have moved from being your father, Kyle, to being just a caricature or an archetype of your father. That is going on in your head, because when we have closed-minded thinking about people, and we're sure of who they are and what they did, and we're sure that what has happened to us should not have happened, we close ourselves off to the possibility that maybe something was for your good. Kind of like a cross, right? Like the cross was
Yeah.
bad, or what? You're wearing a cross right now. Wasn't that like a bad thing?
And for so many years, I got it intellectually. And I thought earlier this year when I realized, oh, my father has imparted strength and willpower to me. Ah, I figured that out. All's good. But no, I've never actually sat with the wound. And what
He
came
fucking
through
hurt
in
you
my session
deeply.
yesterday,
No, he fucking hurt you
no.
deeply,
Well,
brother.
what happened, he threw us into the most unsafe and desperate and deadly situation in our life. We had to flee from home because it wasn't safe there anymore. People were threatening my mother's safety because she divorced him. And so we fled to Florida with her family who were addicts, and we couldn't stay with them. And this is something that my mother told me after I had the grace of God to like take her through an MDMA journey. It's like one day we left and we were all in the car. And I remember being in this car and had everything we owned in it. And she said to me, at that point, I didn't know where we were going. All my boys are with me, everything we had. I didn't know where we were going. And we ended up in some abandoned home, in some neighborhood, some ghetto. And it's just like, Mom, why are there mattresses on the floor? Like, where's all of our belongings and furniture? And she just had the sweet things to say to calm us down. People took note and helped her out, helped her along, got her a job at a McDonald's, supported her. The moral of the story is this went on for a long time, even after we made it back to Rhode Island. Just a revolving door of men. But that didn't feel bad to me. I felt all of them supporting her. I'm sure it created some kind of strange wound around relationship. But the thing that I'm realizing that I need to bring into this healing with my father wound, my mother was able to just receive so much help without shame, without guilt. She just took it all. And she never went back with vengeance to anybody. There was one man that really wronged her that we know about, me and my older brother. Took all of her money, charged her credit cards to the max. And then when we found about that, I'm in a car with my brother. We're hunting this man. And I feel in my body like, I think we're about to kill somebody. And okay, let's do this. Like I felt so connected to my brother, the father, my dad was coming through us, this vengeance, this fury. And she calls us and she stops us. It's that energy, this faith in God and angels and fairies that she's always had, the place where she comes from to meet me wherever I am, even though not knowing what I'm doing with my life. She is the one who has imparted me with the greatest gifts that allow me to do this work. And now I need to allow others to give that to me so I can come to completion with my father. That's what's happening for me right now. And I feel it. I feel the sadness. Like, I didn't even know what she was going through. I feel her wounding. I can feel his confusion in knowing he was doing his best. He was he was tormented ever since after that. He tried so many times to receive forgiveness from my mother. I don't think he's ever even forgiven himself. And I said the words to him, but it hasn't happened.
So painful. I'm sorry.
And it's such a gift. Like this is what allows me to help so many people because I've been down and out. When I was in Florida, I was like one of a few white boys in these ghetto schools, and I know what it's like to experience racism. Even as a highly privileged white male from the West, I fucking get it. I was beat, my lunch and my bike stolen. I was put into this little trailer where I was told the gifted kids are. I wasn't gifted. We were in danger. Yeah, I have that. And I'm just so grateful for it.
For all of it. Yeah. Well, I like the way. Yeah, I like the way this is going here. I don't know if forgiveness shows up quite as readily without gratitude.
Truly.
So the gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I could feel how I can feel the energy, the potency of those things in your youth that have shaped who you are today. I have a feeling that one of the things that is an outcome of your father's behavior toward you and the family has been your embrace of harm reduction and your beautiful empathy and care, not only for men, but for women and for the people that you work with. And so, in a roundabout way, your father sort of taught you how not to be and made it really clear that there's certain things that really matter in the world because you've seen it. You've seen it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I want to honor you for the path that you've chosen because you could have gone a lot of different ways. You know, both of us could have really just been as messy as our dads. You know.
Yeah. There's something to that. There's something really special to that. It's not just hard work and tact. It's a spirit at work. Like it's a divine calling.
Yeah. You know, I saw a little thing with Muji the other day. I don't know if you ever look at Muji Baba. Somebody came to Muji and they said, Muji, I'm really trying to detach, from whatever, my problem, my past, my thing. And Muji laughed and he said, detach. You just detach. He said, there's no trying. You either are detached or not, So he said, just when you're ready to detach, you detach. And it was almost comical because he took a very simple sort of conundrum and just you know splayed it open. You're going to forgive or you're not, and forgiveness might be like a small plant that you have to keep tending. If the leaves get a little burned or they get some aphids on it or there's something about it that's not right, but you're fostering that energy and you want to continue to foster it.
Reminds me of the lesson about the garden in Iron John. A man must tend a garden at some point to become a man. Got to
Right.
care for something.
That's right. Something, we were officiating a wedding recently for Alec and Lacey, and one of the messages we brought to the wedding is that message about love. Love is about the other. Love is always about the other. And if we're going to love, we're going to be transformed by our love for the other, just uh, by loving. We become different. We become bigger. We actually become more complete when we love, not just one particular partner, but by choosing love. Choosing one of the things I also got recently during a retreat was this idea of belonging, like how important it is for us to feel belonging. And when we greet people with a heart of welcome and with a heart of like, hey, I'm with you, you're a part of my world. That is like drive up healing. It's just like instant balm for the soul. My involvement with men's work has made it so that I can walk into a bar, a biker bar, a church, a men's group, a bunch of Orthodox Jews. I can walk into any group of men and feel like, hey, brother, what's up? I know you. I know you.
Yeah.
I am you. and this idea that there are no barriers, especially when you choose love, the barriers come down.
Well, I feel like this is an appropriate place to close out this conversation.
So great to spend some time with you, Kyle. Really, really enjoy the invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Len.